I stood in the corner of the reception hall, watching as the guests mingled, their laughter rising to meet the soft music playing overhead. My daughter, Rachel, looked radiant in her wedding gown, the ivory fabric catching the light as she moved through the crowd. Her smile was genuine, her eyes bright with joy as she greeted relatives and friends alongside her new husband, Daniel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I took a sip from my champagne glass, the bubbles bitter on my tongue. The wedding had been beautiful, everything a father could hope for his only daughter. The ceremony at the old stone church, the exchanging of vows beneath stained glass windows that cast colored light across their faces. I had walked her down the aisle, my heart swelling with pride and a touch of melancholy. It was the natural order of things. Fathers give away their daughters, but that didn't make it any easier. When Rachel had introduced me to Daniel 3 years ago, I had my reservations. There was something calculated about his charm, something practiced in the way he complimented my home while his eyes took inventory of everything that wasn't up to his standards. But Rachel was in love, and I had learned long ago that love makes us blind to the flaws that others see clearly. "Mr. Mitchell," Daniel's voice cut through my thoughts. He stood before me, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Enjoying yourself?" "It's a beautiful wedding," I replied, lifting my glass slightly. "You and Rachel did a wonderful job planning it." "Well, mostly my family's planner," he corrected, his tone casual but pointed. "These things require a certain level of expertise." I nodded, swallowing the retort that rose in my throat. This was Rachel's day. I wouldn't spoil it by rising to her husband's bait. "I wanted to thank you for your contribution to the wedding," Daniel continued, lowering his voice. "I know it must have been a stretch for you financially. Rest assured, Rachel will want for nothing from now on." The condescension in his voice made my grip tighten on the champagne flute. I had worked as a high school English teacher for 30 years, raising Rachel alone after her mother died when she was just 8. I had put Rachel through college, helped her buy her first car, supported her dreams of becoming an architect. I wasn't wealthy, but I had provided everything my daughter needed. "I didn't realize my daughter was in want before," I said, evenly. Daniel laughed, a practiced sound that drew the attention of nearby guests who smiled automatically in response. "Oh, Thomas, you did your best certainly, but there's a difference between getting by and truly living, isn't there?" Before I could respond, he was called away by his mother, a woman dripping in diamonds, who had barely acknowledged my existence during the wedding planning. I watched him go, the familiar ache of inadequacy settling in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had when Rachel announced their engagement, when I saw the size of the diamond on her finger, when I toured their new home in a neighborhood I could never afford to live in. The reception continued around me, a blur of speeches and toasts. I gave mine early, hands trembling slightly, as I spoke of Rachel's childhood, her determination, her kindness. I told stories that made the guests laugh and Rachel blush, carefully curated memories that painted the picture of our life together without dwelling on the struggles. I didn't mention the nights I'd stayed up grading papers at the kitchen table after putting Rachel to bed, or the summer jobs I took to afford her dance lessons, or the vacations we never had. When it came time for dinner, I made my way to the assigned table near the back of the hall. Daniel's family occupied the tables closest to the head table, of course. I found myself seated with distant relatives of Daniel's, none of whom seemed particularly interested in conversing with the bride's father. I watched as Rachel and Daniel took their seats at the head table, surrounded by their wedding party, all friends of Daniel's from his prestigious law firm and their equally polished wives. Rachel had wanted to include her childhood friend, Emma, as a bridesmaid, but Daniel had insisted on symmetry. 5 groomsmen and 5 bridesmaids, all perfectly paired. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The first course arrived, something artfully arranged on oversized plates. I ate quietly, listening to the conversations around me, feeling increasingly out of place. These people spoke of summer homes and investment portfolios, of charity galas and private schools for children not yet born. They inhabited a world I had only glimpsed from the outside. After the main course, the speeches began again. Daniel's best man told stories of their college days that seemed to involve a lot of expensive cars and exclusive parties. Daniel's father spoke next, his voice booming with pride as he welcomed Rachel to a family that knows the value of ambition and success. I felt the subtle dig in his words, the implied criticism of my own modest achievements. When the speeches concluded, Daniel stood, straightening his jacket with a practiced motion. He thanked everyone for coming, his words smooth and polished. Then he turned, his eyes finding me in the crowd. "And a special thank you to my new father-in-law, Thomas Mitchell," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "a high school English teacher who has dedicated his life to educating young minds. It's a noble profession, though perhaps not the most lucrative." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I forced a smile, though my cheeks burned. "But Thomas gave me something priceless," Daniel continued, his smile sharp. "His incredible daughter, Rachel. And for that, I will always be grateful. Even if he did arrive today in a suit that's seen better decades." More laughter, louder this time. Rachel's smile had frozen, her eyes darting between her new husband and me. "Stand up, Thomas," Daniel called. "Let everyone see the man who raised this beautiful bride." I stood slowly, conscious of every eye in the room on me. On my old suit, carefully pressed but undeniably dated. On my scuffed shoes that I'd polished that morning. On my tie, a gift from Rachel on Father's Day years ago. "To Thomas," Daniel raised his glass, "the English teacher who probably wishes he could correct my grammar right now." The guests raised their glasses, their amusement obvious. I nodded, acknowledging the toast while fighting the urge to walk out. This wasn't about me, I reminded myself. This was Rachel's day. As I sat back down, I caught Rachel's eye. The distress on her face was obvious, at least to me. I gave her a small smile, trying to convey that I was fine, that Daniel's words hadn't wounded me. The lie must have shown on my face because her eyes filled with tears before she quickly looked away. The music started again, and couples moved to the dance floor. I remained at my table, watching as Daniel led Rachel in their first dance, his hand possessively on the small of her back. They moved well together, both naturally graceful. From a distance, they looked perfect. The successful lawyer and the beautiful architect, beginning their life of privilege and plenty. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice Daniel approaching until he stood beside me, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. "Thomas," he said, setting one glass in front of me, "I think it's time for a proper father-son chat, don't you?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "By all means." Daniel sat, his movements fluid and confident. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said, his voice lowered, "for giving Rachel the best upbringing you could manage." "I did more than manage," I said quietly, the first flicker of anger rising in my chest. "I raised the daughter I'm incredibly proud of." Of course," Daniel nodded, his tone placating. "And now I'll take over. Give her the life she deserves, the life you couldn't provide." I took a careful sip of champagne, buying time to control my response. "Rachel never wanted for anything that mattered." "Material things do matter, Thomas," Daniel said, his smile never wavering. "Much as we'd like to pretend otherwise. The right schools, the right neighborhood, the right connections. They open doors. Doors that remained closed for Rachel because of circumstances." "You mean because of me?" I said flatly. "I didn't say that." Daniel's smile widened. "But let's be honest. Teaching high school English, it's respectable work. Essential even.
but it's hardly the path to providing the finer things in life.
I thought of the small house where Rachel had grown up, the second-hand furniture, the carefully budgeted grocery trips, the library books instead of purchased ones, but also the laughter that filled those rooms, the garden we'd planted together, the walls covered in Rachel's artwork and photos of our adventures. The finer things, I repeated. Is that what you think Rachel wants? It's what everyone wants, Daniel said, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. And it's what I can give her, what you never could. The words struck like a physical blow. Not because they were new, I had thought them myself in moments of doubt and insecurity, but because they were spoken aloud, and with such casual cruelty. I think you underestimate what I've given my daughter, I said quietly. Daniel leaned closer, his cologne overwhelming. Let me be clear, Thomas. You're a small man with a small life. You raised Rachel the best you could, and now she's moving up in the world, my world, where she belongs. He stood, straightening his jacket. I'm glad we had this chat. I thought it was important to establish our understanding. Rachel speaks fondly of you, of course, and you'll always be welcome in our home. Within reason. As he walked away, his posture perfect, his handmade shoes silent on the expensive carpet. I remained seated, the champagne turning sour in my stomach. Around me, the reception continued, music playing, guests laughing, glasses clinking, a celebration of love that had been poisoned by contempt. I watched as Daniel rejoined Rachel, sliding his arm around her waist possessively. She looked up at him, her smile automatic but her eyes searching his face, perhaps sensing something in his expression. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that should have been tender but seemed performative, designed for the watching guests. I had always prided myself on restraint. As a teacher, I had learned to control my temper, to respond to provocation with calm reason rather than heated emotion. I had taught my students that words had power, that they should be chosen carefully and spoken with intention. Daniel had spoken his words with clear intention, to diminish me, to establish his superiority, to claim Rachel not just as his wife, but as a trophy, proof of his ability to acquire what he desired. I stood slowly, setting my napkin beside my untouched dessert. Several options presented themselves. I could confront Daniel publicly, creating a scene that would embarrass Rachel on her wedding day. I could leave quietly, nursing my wounded pride at home. Or I could do something else entirely. The band was playing a slow song, couples swaying on the dance floor. I made my way toward Rachel, who stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the dancers. Daniel was nowhere to be seen, probably networking with the influential guests, making connections that would further his career. "May I have this dance?" I asked, extending my hand to my daughter. Rachel's face lit up, her relief palpable. Dad, of course. As we moved on to the dance floor, I was struck by how grown-up she looked, how confident and poised. Yet I could still see the little girl who had climbed into my lap for bedtime stories, who had gripped my hand tightly on her first day of kindergarten, who had sobbed in my arms when her mother died. "You know," I said as we danced, "your mother would have loved to see you today. She'd be so proud of the woman you've become." Rachel's eyes glistened with tears. "I wish she could have been here." "She is, in a way," I said softly. "In you, in the kind heart you have, in your creativity, in the way you light up a room just by entering it." We danced in silence for a moment, swaying to the music. "Dad," Rachel said, finally, her voice hesitant. "I heard what Daniel said in his speech, about your suit, about being a teacher. He was just trying to be funny. He doesn't mean anything by it." I looked at my beautiful daughter, her face upturned and worried. In that moment, I had a choice.
I could tell her about Daniel's words at the table, expose the cruelty beneath his polished exterior, or I could protect her, allow her the joy of her wedding day unblemished by doubt. I know, I lied, smiling reassuringly. It's fine, sweetheart. I've heard worse from my students. Relief washed over her face. I was worried you might be upset. It would take more than a joke about my ancient suit to upset me. Though he's not wrong, this thing has seen a lot of graduations.
Rachel laughed, the tension leaving her shoulders. I love you, Dad. You know that, right? I know, I said, my throat tightening. I love you too, more than anything. The song ended, and I escorted Rachel back to the edge of the dance floor. Daniel appeared as if summoned, his hand immediately claiming Rachel's elbow. There you are, darling, he said, his voice warm but his eyes cold as they met mine. Your aunts are asking for photos. Rachel turned to me, apologetic. Dad, Go, I said, smiling. It's your day. Enjoy every minute. As they walked away, I watched Rachel's back, straight and elegant in her wedding gown. Daniel leaned down to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed, genuine and unguarded. Whatever else he was, he could make her laugh. I had to remember that. I returned to my table, gathering my courage for what I knew I had to do. Not for my sake, but for Rachel's. Because if Daniel thought he could speak to me with such disrespect on his wedding day, what would he say to Rachel when the doors were closed and the witnesses gone? I had taught literature for 30 years. I knew that every story had a turning point, a moment when the protagonist faced a choice that would define everything that followed. This was mine. And like the heroes I had taught my students to analyze and understand, I would not choose the easy path. I would choose the right one. As the evening wound down, guests began to leave, pressing envelopes into Daniel's hands and kissing Rachel's cheek. I waited, watching. Daniel excused himself, heading toward the restrooms. I followed, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I found him in the empty hallway outside, checking his appearance in a decorative mirror. He saw my reflection and turned, his expression a mixture of annoyance and amusement. "Thomas," he said, straightening his tie, "need directions to the bar? I noticed you've been hitting it rather hard." I had, in fact, barely touched my drinks all evening, too focused on observing Daniel, on watching how he interacted with Rachel and others. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I wanted to talk to you, man to man." Daniel's eyes narrowed, his practiced smile faltering for just a moment. "Man to man. How quaint. But make it quick. I have guests to attend to." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I want to be clear about something. You can mock my profession, my suit, even my financial situation, but I won't stand by while you disrespect me in front of my daughter." Daniel laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls. "Disrespect? I was paying tribute to my new father-in-law. The guests loved it." "We both know what you were doing," I said quietly, "and it stops now." "Or what?" Daniel stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. "What exactly do you think you can do, Thomas? You're a high school teacher with a mortgage on a tiny house in a forgettable neighborhood. I'm a partner at Caldwell & Stern. I make more in a month than you do in a year." I held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not talking about money or status. I'm talking about basic human decency." "Spare me the lecture," he scoffed. "This is the real world, not your classroom. Rachel is part of my world now, my family, my circle. You should be grateful she's moving up in the world." "Moving up?" I repeated. "Is that how you see your marriage? As a promotion for Rachel?" A flash of something, irritation perhaps, or possibly guilt, crossed his face before the mask of confidence returned. "Rachel deserves the best. I'm giving her that. What are you offering, except outdated advice and embarrassing family dinners in your dated kitchen?" The words stung, but I refused to show it. Instead, I took another approach. "Tell me something, Daniel. What's Rachel's favorite book?"
He blinked, caught off guard by the change of subject. What? Her favorite book, the one she rereads every year. He shrugged dismissively. I don't know, some architecture thing, probably. To Kill a Mockingbird, he said. She's read it every summer since she was 15. She admires Atticus Finch because he stands up for what's right even when it costs him. Daniel rolled his eyes. Fascinating. Is there a point to this little English lesson? What about her worst fear? Spiders, he answered quickly, looking pleased with himself. I shook my head. Disappointing people she loves. It's why she works so hard, why she puts others first, even when it hurts her. Annoyance flashed across Daniel's face. I know my wife, Thomas.
Do you? What song was playing when she learned to ride a bike? What makes her cry during movies? Which shoulder aches when it rains because she fell out of Mrs. Peterson's apple tree when she was 9? Daniel's jaw tightened. Those are trivia facts, not meaningful knowledge. They're her life, I said, the experiences that shaped her into the woman you claim to love. I don't need to know what song was playing during some childhood milestone to love my wife, Daniel snapped. I provide for her. I give her security, status, a future. That's what matters. I studied him, seeing clearly now what I had only suspected before. Daniel didn't love Rachel. Not the real Rachel with her quirks and dreams and secret fears. He loved the idea of her, the perfect wife to complete his perfect life. You know, I said carefully, when Rachel was 12, she wanted to quit her piano lessons. She'd been taking them for years and suddenly decided she hated them. But instead of just letting her quit, I asked her why. Turns out, she had a recital coming up and was terrified of failing. She didn't hate piano. She was afraid of not being perfect. Fascinating parenting anecdote, Daniel said dryly, checking his watch. Is there a moral to this story, or can I get back to my wedding reception? The point, I continued calmly, is that sometimes what people say they want isn't what they actually need. Sometimes what looks like rejection is really fear. And this applies to me how, exactly? I think you're afraid, Daniel. Not of me, certainly, but of not measuring up in some way, of not being enough. And that fear makes you belittle others to feel bigger yourself. His face flushed, anger replacing the practiced condescension. You don't know anything about me. I know that a secure man doesn't need to humiliate his father-in-law at his own wedding, I said simply. I know that a man who truly loves a woman respects the people she loves. Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Listen carefully, Thomas. You're here because Rachel wanted you here, but don't mistake that for influence or importance. Your role in her life is over. I'm her family now, her priority. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be for everyone. I met his gaze steadily. You're wrong. Being a father isn't a role that ends. It's a lifetime commitment. How touching, he sneered. But let me be perfectly clear. Your outdated suit, your mediocre career, your small-town values, they have no place in our life. You're an embarrassment, Thomas. A reminder of where Rachel came from, not where she's going. The words hung in the air between us, harsh and final. In that moment, I saw Rachel's future with crystal clarity, a life of material comfort but emotional poverty, of social status but personal diminishment. I feel sorry for you, I said finally. Daniel barked out a laugh. You feel sorry for me? That's rich, coming from you. Yes, I nodded, because you'll never know the real joy of loving someone for who they truly are, flaws and all. You'll never experience the depth of connection that comes from growing together through hardship. You'll have possessions and status, but not happiness. Not real happiness. Save your pity, Daniel said coldly, and your amateur psychology. Rachel and I are building a life you couldn't even dream of. A life, I agreed, but not a home. Before he could respond, the door to the men's room opened, and one of Daniel's groomsmen emerged, slightly drunk and very jovial. Daniel, there you are.
Your mother's looking for you. Something about the photographer wanting family shots before people start leaving. Daniel's mask of charm slipped back into place seamlessly. Of course, I'll be right there. He turned to me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. This conversation is over, Thomas. Permanently. As he walked away, shoulders straight, head high, I remained in the hallway, the weight of his words pressing on me. I had failed to reach him. Failed to make him understand that Rachel deserved more than luxury and status. She deserved respect, partnership, and genuine love. I returned to the reception, moving along the edges of the crowd, watching as Daniel rejoined Rachel for more photographs. His arm around her waist looked possessive rather than protective. His smile for the camera was perfect, practiced, empty of real emotion. Rachel caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, questioning smile. I nodded reassuringly, keeping my face carefully neutral. This was her wedding day. I wouldn't tarnish it with the truth about the man she had married. Later, as guests began to depart, I approached Rachel to say goodbye. She was standing with a group of Daniel's friends, laughing at something someone had said. When she saw me, she broke away, meeting me halfway. "Dad," she said, embracing me tightly, "you're not leaving already, are you?" "It's getting late," I said, smiling, "and the bride has other guests to attend to." "They can wait," Rachel said, taking my hands in hers. "I've barely had a chance to talk to you all evening." "That's how weddings are," I said. "A blur of faces and congratulations. But we'll have plenty of time to talk later." Rachel searched my face, her brow furrowing slightly. "Is everything okay? You seem, I don't know, distant." I squeezed her hands. "Everything's fine. Just emotional seeing my little girl all grown up and married." "Dad," she said softly, "I'll always be your little girl. You know that, right?" The lump in my throat made it difficult to speak. "I know, sweetheart." "And Daniel knows how important you are to me," she continued. "He's just nervous around you, trying too hard to impress." I nearly laughed at that. The idea that Daniel was trying to impress me rather than diminish me. But I kept my expression neutral. "Of course. Once you get to know each other better, you'll see what I see in him," Rachel said, her eyes bright with conviction. "He's driven and ambitious, but he's also kind and generous. He makes me feel special." "That's all I want for you," I said honestly. "To feel special, valued, and loved. Truly loved." Rachel hugged me again, fiercely. "I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything. For today, for my whole life." "I love you too," I whispered, holding her close one last time before letting go. "More than you'll ever know." As I walked away, I felt Daniel's eyes on me from across the room. I didn't turn to meet his gaze. There was nothing more to say tonight. The drive home was quiet, the radio off, only the sound of tires on pavement and my own thoughts for company. The neighborhood was dark when I arrived, most of my neighbors already asleep. My house looked small and shabby compared to the grandeur of the wedding venue, but it was mine, paid for with years of honest work, filled with memories of raising Rachel. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by silence and familiar shadows. On the mantel, a photograph of Rachel at her college graduation caught the moonlight streaming through the window. Her smile was radiant, her future bright with promise. Beside it, a photo of her mother, gone 15 years but still present in Rachel's laugh, in the determined set of her chin when facing a challenge. I tried, Marie. I really did. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying Daniel's words, searching for something I could have said differently, some argument that might have pierced his armor of arrogance.
But deep down I knew the problem wasn't my approach, it was Daniel himself. A man incapable of seeing beyond status and appearances to the things that truly mattered. Morning brought no clarity, only resignation. Rachel and Daniel would leave for their honeymoon today, 2 weeks in Italy before returning to their new life together. A life I had been told, in no uncertain terms, I had no place in. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Rachel's face lit up the screen, surprising me. She should have been busy with last-minute packing, not calling her old dad. "Rachel? Everything okay?" "Dad." Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the strain beneath the surface. "Can I come over?" "Of course," I said immediately. "Are you all right?" "I'll explain when I get there. I'm on my way now." Before I could ask more questions, she hung up. I stood holding the phone, anxiety building in my chest. In 15 years of raising her alone, I had learned to recognize the tone that meant something was seriously wrong. 20 minutes later, a car pulled into my driveway. Not the sleek luxury vehicle Daniel drove, but a taxi. Rachel emerged, still wearing yesterday's makeup, but in jeans and a sweater instead of her wedding gown. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I met her at the door, alarmed. "Rachel, what happened?" She walked past me into the living room, her movement stiff with tension. When she turned to face me, her expression was a mixture of anger and devastation. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Know what?" I asked, though a sinking feeling in my stomach told me exactly what she meant. "About Daniel. Who he really is." Her voice broke on the last word. "What he thinks of you. Of where I came from." I hesitated, torn between truth and protection. "Rachel, don't lie to me, Dad," she cut in.
Please, not now, I sighed, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing, arms crossed tightly across her chest. I had concerns, I admitted, but I didn't want to interfere. You seemed happy. Seemed, she repeated bitterly. That's the key word, isn't it? I seemed happy because I thought I knew who I was marrying. What happened? I asked again, gently. Rachel finally sank onto the sofa, the fight draining out of her. After you left, we went back to the hotel. Daniel was drinking with his friends, celebrating. I was tired, went up to our room early to pack for the honeymoon. She took a shuddering breath. His phone kept getting messages. I wasn't snooping, I swear. It was right there, and the notifications kept lighting up the screen. I sat beside her, waiting. They were from his friend, Carter, talking about the wedding. About me. Her voice hardened. About you? I could imagine all too clearly what those messages contained. Carter was joking about how Daniel had married down, but upgraded the merchandise. Rachel's hand clenched into fists. Daniel replied that sometimes you have to overlook the background to secure the asset. The crude appraisal of my daughter as an asset made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't about my anger. I confronted him when he came up, Rachel continued. He was drunk, didn't even try to deny it. Just laughed and said Carter was being an idiot, that I should learn to take a joke. I'm sorry, I said quietly. But that wasn't all. Rachel's voice caught. When I kept pressing, he got angry, said I was overreacting, that I should be grateful he'd rescued me from a life of mediocrity, that you... She stopped, tears filling her eyes. That I what, sweetheart? That you were an embarrassment, that your speech was pathetic, that he'd done me a favor by marrying me despite my disadvantaged upbringing. She looked up at me, devastated. How could I have been so blind? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Love blinds us to flaws. Hope obscures red flags. I'd seen it countless times in literature,
taught my students to recognize it in characters, but recognizing it in real life, especially when it involves those we love, is infinitely harder. "Where is Daniel now?" I asked finally. "Still at the hotel," Rachel said, wiping out her tears. "I told him I needed space to think. He didn't even argue, just said I should calm down and be reasonable, like I was having a tantrum instead of discovering my husband thinks I'm some kind of trophy he purchased." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I'm so sorry, Rachel." "Why didn't you tell me? About how he treated you? About what he said?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked gently. Rachel was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I was so in love with the idea of him, with the life we were planning. I might have thought you were just being overprotective. That's why I didn't say anything. Some truths people have to discover for themselves, no matter how much it hurts to watch them learn the hard way." Rachel leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, like when she was a child and needed comfort. "What do I do now, Dad? I'm married to him. We have a house together, joint accounts. Our honeymoon leaves in 6 hours. I stroked her hair, buying time to choose my words carefully. "Only you can decide what happens next, Rachel. But I can tell you this. No one deserves to be valued only for what they represent or what they can provide. True love sees all of you, your past, your present, your dreams for the future, and cherishes every part." "I thought he did," she whispered. "I really thought he loved me." "Maybe he does, in his way," I said, trying to be fair, despite my own feelings about Daniel. "But his idea of love seems to be tied to status and appearance, not to who you truly are." Rachel straightened, wiping at her tears with a determined hands. "I need to think, to figure out what I want." "Take all the time you need," I said. "You can stay here as long as you want." She nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I didn't bring anything with me. All my things are at the hotel or at the new house. I still have some of your old clothes in the guest room, and we can shop for anything else you need." Rachel smiled for the first time since arriving, a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My room is still the guest room?" "It will always be your room. This will always be your home." She hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything."
As Rachel went upstairs to shower and change, I remained on the sofa, a mixture of emotions washing over me. Anger at Daniel for his cruelty and arrogance. Heartbreak for Rachel's pain. But also, beneath it all, a spark of hope that she might now have a chance at genuine happiness with someone who would value her for all that she was, not just what she represented. My phone buzzed with a text message. Daniel's name appeared on the screen, sending a surge of anger through me. I nearly deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. "Tell Rachel to stop being childish and come trek to the hotel. We have a flight to catch." No concern, no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt he'd caused. Just imperious demand and irritation at having his plans disrupted. In those few words, he revealed more about his character than any conversation could. I didn't respond. This wasn't my battle to fight. Rachel would make her own decisions, in her own time. My role now was to support her, whatever she chose. I made a fresh pot of coffee and toasted some bread, a simple breakfast that somehow felt like the most important meal I'd ever prepared. When Rachel came downstairs, wearing old jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, her hair wet from the shower, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but also more like herself than she had in months. "Coffee?" I offered, sliding a mug across the counter. She took it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. Daniel texted me 3 times. What did he say? That I'm overreacting, that we need to talk, that the car is waiting to take us to the airport. She took a sip of coffee, her expression hardening.
He doesn't even understand why I'm upset. That's the worst part. He genuinely doesn't see what he did wrong. I remain silent, letting her work through her thoughts. I keep thinking about what you said last night, Rachel continued. About a life versus a home. I thought we were building both. But now I see that Daniel was only ever interested in the life. A house, the cars, the vacations, the status. The perfect wife to complete the perfect picture. And what do you want? I asked. Rachel stared into her coffee, considering. I have an appointment this afternoon. Would you like me to go with you? I asked. Rachel shook her head. I need to do this myself, but thank you. The lawyer's office was in a modest building downtown, nothing like the gleaming high-rise where Daniel worked. Rachel returned looking both drained and determined. Well, I asked as she dropped her purse on the counter. It's complicated, she sighed, sinking into a chair. Because we were only married for one day, an annulment is possible. But Daniel won't make it easy. Mark, that's Emma's cousin, thinks we should prepare for a fight. Daniel does like winning, I observed. Rachel gave a humorless laugh. That's the understatement of the century. But I have something he doesn't expect. What's that? She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to me. I listened as Daniel's voice, slightly slurred but unmistakable, filled the kitchen. Of course I married down. Look at her background. But Rachel's got the look, the charm, the right degree. She's perfect for the image I need to project. Her father is an embarrassment, but we can minimize his involvement. Small price to pay for the perfect wife. I felt sick hearing him reduce my daughter to a series of useful attributes, like features on a luxury car. You recorded him? I asked, handing back the phone. Rachel nodded grimly. After I found the texts, I confronted him again when he came up to the room. Started recording on my phone before he arrived. He was drunk, angry that I was overreacting. Said all this without realizing I was documenting everything. Is that legal? I asked, concerned. Mark says it depends, but it establishes a pattern of behavior along with the texts. It shows Daniel's true character and intentions, which strengthens the case for an annulment based on fraud. She tucked the phone away. I'm not trying to take him for everything he's worth, Dad. I just want out. Clean break. And the house? Your joint accounts? I don't want any of it, Rachel said firmly. I had a good job before I met Daniel. I can rebuild. I wanted to offer financial help to ease her burden, but I knew my teacher's salary wouldn't go far. Still, I had some savings, meant for retirement but more urgently needed now. You know you can stay here as long as you need, I said instead. No rent, no timeline. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I know, Dad. Thank you. That evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Daniel emerged, immaculate in an expensive suit, his face set in determined lines. Stay here, I told Rachel, rising to meet him before he could reach the porch. I need to speak with my wife, Daniel announced, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She doesn't want to talk to you right now, I said calmly, standing on the bottom step of the porch, blocking his path. Daniel's mask of civility slipped, revealing the contempt beneath. This doesn't concern you, Thomas. This is between me and Rachel. That's where you're wrong, I replied. When you hurt my daughter, it very much concerns me. Your daughter, he sneered, is throwing away everything I have offered her because of a few thoughtless comments. Comments, I might add, that were never meant for her ears. That's your defense?
That you only speak about her with contempt when she's not around to hear it? Daniel's jaw tightened. I've apologized. I've sent flowers. I've called every day. What more does she want? Understanding, I said simply. Recognition that the problem isn't what you said, but what you believe. Don't lecture me about beliefs, he snapped. You, with your modest house and your teacher's salary and your outdated ideas about what matters in life. I smiled slightly, realizing how little power his words had over me now. You know, Daniel, for someone so focused on appearances, you've never bothered to look beneath the surface of anything truly important. Rachel, Daniel called over my shoulder. This is ridiculous. We're supposed to be in Italy right now. The partners are asking questions. Come home and we can sort this out privately. Rachel appeared beside me, her face pale but resolute. There's nothing to sort out, Daniel. I've spoken with a lawyer. I'm filing for an annulment. Daniel's confident expression faltered. An annulment? On what grounds? Fraud, Rachel said quietly. Misrepresentation, deception. Take your pick. That's absurd, he scoffed. You can't prove any of that. Rachel held up her phone. Actually, I can. Your conversation with Carter? Your drunken admission of what you really think of me and my family? It's all documented. The color trained from Daniel's face. You recorded me? Without my knowledge? That's illegal. So is fraud, Rachel countered. My lawyer thinks I have a strong case. Daniel's expression hardened, his legal mind clearly calculating risks and strategies. You won't win this, Rachel. My firm has the best attorneys in the city. I'll fight you every step of the way. Why? She asked, genuinely curious. You clearly don't love me, at least not for who I really am. Why fight to keep someone you consider beneath you? Because I don't lose, Daniel said coldly, ever. I watched my daughter's face as she absorbed this final confirmation of Daniel's character. There was pain there, certainly, but also a growing clarity and strength. This isn't a court case to be won or lost, Rachel said. It's my life, and I choose not to spend it with someone who sees me as a trophy instead of a partner. Daniel's mask slipped completely, his handsome face contorted with anger. You're making a massive mistake. You'll never have the life I could give you. You'll end up just like him. He jabbed a finger toward me. Teaching ungrateful kids for poverty wages, living in a house that's falling apart, driving a car held together with duct tape. I expected Rachel to be hurt by his vicious assessment of my life, but instead she smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that transformed her face. You know what, Daniel? I hope I do end up like my father, a person of integrity, who values people for who they are, not what they own or represent. Someone who understands that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or status symbols. Daniel stared at her, genuinely bewildered. His worldview couldn't accommodate the idea that anyone would choose my modest life over his luxurious one. You'll regret this, he said finally, his voice cold. When the emotion fades and reality sets in, you'll realize what you threw away. No, Rachel said with quiet confidence. I'll realize what I saved, myself. Daniel looked from Rachel to me, his expression hardening into something ugly. Like father, like daughter, embracing mediocrity, calling it virtue. Goodbye, Daniel, Rachel said, taking my arm. My lawyer will be in touch. We turned and walked back up the porch steps together, not looking back as Daniel stood fuming on the sidewalk. I heard him mutter a curse, then the slam of his car door, the engine revving as he sped away. Inside the house, Rachel let out a shaky breath. Well, that happened. You were magnificent, I told her, filled with pride. I was terrified, she admitted, but also relieved. It's like I can finally see clearly again. She looked around the living room,
at the worn furniture and faded curtains, the bookshelves overflowing with well-loved volumes. He really doesn't understand, does he? Why someone would choose this over what he offers? People value different things, I said. Daniel values status, appearance, power. We value authenticity, connection, purpose. Rachel nodded slowly. I think I lost sight of that for a while. I got caught up in the excitement of his world, the restaurants, the vacations, the beautiful things. I started believing that those things equated to happiness. It's an easy trap to fall into, I said gently. Our culture reinforces it constantly. But you never did, Rachel observed. Even when Mom died and money was tight, even when you were working 2 jobs to make ends meet, you never seemed to resent what you didn't have. I thought about this, about the lessons life had taught me through both joy and hardship. I learned early on that happiness comes from alignment, when your outer life reflects your inner values. For me, teaching wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Raising you wasn't a burden, it was my greatest privilege. This house isn't just shelter, it's a home filled with memories. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I want that kind of alignment in my life, that kind of peace. You'll find it, I assured her. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. And in the meantime, you've already taken the hardest step, choosing truth over comfort, authenticity over appearance.
3 months after the wedding, Rachel received notice that the annulment had been granted. Daniel had finally relented, perhaps realizing that a prolonged legal battle would only bring more attention to his true character. We celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, just the 2 of us. Rachel had found a new apartment, modest but charming, and was preparing to move out the following weekend. Her architectural firm had welcomed her back with open arms, and though her salary couldn't provide the luxuries Daniel had promised, it was enough for a good life, a genuine life. "I have something for you," I said after dinner, retrieving a small package from my desk drawer. Rachel unwrapped it carefully, revealing a leather-bound journal. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the cover. "But what's the occasion?" "New beginnings," I explained. "When your mother died, I started keeping a journal. It helped me process my grief, clarify my thoughts, remember what truly mattered. I thought it might help you do the same." Rachel opened the journal to find a handwritten inscription on the first page. "True wealth is measured not by what you own, but by what owns your heart. Choose wisely, love deeply, live authentically. Dad." She looked up, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you for this and for everything else, for standing by me through all of this." "Always," I promised. "That's what love does. It stands by. It lifts up. It holds space." The following Saturday, friends gathered to help Rachel move into her new apartment. Emma was there. Their friendship rekindled after Daniel's exclusionary policies had driven them apart. Several of Rachel's colleagues came, bringing housewarming gifts and good-natured jokes about her starter apartment. As we unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, I watched my daughter directing operations, laughing with her friends, creating a new home from scratch. There was a lightness to her now, a quiet confidence that had been missing during her time with Daniel. Late in the afternoon, when most of the others had gone, Rachel and I sat on her new, second-hand sofa, surveying the organized chaos of her apartment. "It's not quite the penthouse Daniel promised," she said with a wry smile. "But it's mine. Really mine." "It's perfect," I told her, "because it's authentic." Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder, just as she had done since childhood when she was tired or seeking comfort. "I keep thinking about what Daniel said that day on our porch, that I'd end up just like you, and how he meant it as the ultimate insult." "And?" I prompted.
And I realize now that it's actually the greatest compliment. She sat up, looking at me with eyes so like her mother's. You taught me what real success looks like, Dad. Not corner offices or luxury cars, but a life of purpose and integrity. A life where you can look in the mirror every morning and respect the person looking back. My throat tightened with emotion. That's all I ever wanted for you. I know. And it's what I want for myself now, too. As the sun set, casting long shadows across her new beginning, I felt a profound sense of peace. My daughter had faced a painful truth and chosen the harder path. She had lost the material trappings that Daniel offered, but gained something far more valuable: self-respect, clarity of purpose, and alignment between her values and her life. Daniel had been wrong about so many things, but perhaps most fundamentally, he had been wrong about what constitutes success. In his narrow vision, success was measured in acquisitions, whether those acquisitions were property, status symbols, or people. He had seen Rachel as another trophy to display, my modest career as a failure, and our close relationship as a weakness rather than a strength. But true success isn't found in what you accumulate, it's found in who you become. It's measured not by the size of your house, but by the love that fills it. Not by your job title, but the purpose that drives you. Not by the car you drive, but by the integrity that guides your journey. Rachel understood that now, in a way she couldn't have without experiencing the painful contrast of Daniel's values. Sometimes wisdom comes only through difficulty, clarity only through confusion, strength only through vulnerability. As we sat together in her new apartment, surrounded by boxes and potential and promise, I knew that Rachel would be all right, more than all right. She would thrive, not despite walking away from Daniel's world of wealth and status, but because of it.
When I finally left that evening, Rachel walked me to my car, the same reliable old sedan that Daniel had mocked. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for showing me what really matters." I drove home through quiet streets, windows down, cool evening air washing over me. The moon hung low and bright, illuminating the modest houses of my neighborhood. My small house welcomed me with familiar creaks and shadows, with bookshelves filled with stories of redemption and courage, with photographs chronicling a life not of luxury, but of meaning. Daniel had called me a simple man, and perhaps I was, but there is profound power in simplicity, in stripping away pretense to reveal what truly matters. My life might have seemed small in his eyes, but it was authentic, purposeful, and overflowing with the kind of wealth that can never be deposited in a bank. And now my daughter understood that too. Not because I had told her, but because she had discovered it for herself, through pain and disillusionment and the courage to begin again. That was the greater victory. Not over Daniel, but over the seductive allure of a life measured in possessions rather than purpose. As I unlocked my front door, I thought about what Rachel had said, that ending up like me was not a punishment, but a blessing. That true success looks like integrity, purpose, authenticity. That wealth is measured not in dollars, but in meaningful connections. Daniel had tried to humiliate me at that wedding reception, to reduce me to nothing more than my modest circumstances. But in doing so, he had revealed the poverty of his own values, the hollowness at the core of his apparent success. I settled into my favorite chair, picked up the book I'd been reading, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. For my small home filled with memories, for my career spent opening young minds to the power of literature, for my daughter, who had found her way back to what truly mattered. Daniel would never understand the rich tapestry of a life guided by purpose rather than acquisition. He would continue accumulating wealth and status, using people as rungs on his ladder to success, never recognizing the emptiness at the core of such pursuits. But Rachel and I knew better. We understood that a simple life lived with integrity, was worth more than all the trappings of success that money could buy. And in that knowledge, we had found something Daniel, for all his wealth, would never possess: the quiet joy of being truly at home in ourselves and in the world. "There's more," she continued, her smile widening. "The promotion comes with my first major solo project. I'll be designing a new community center for the West Side neighborhood. Affordable housing, childcare facilities, spaces for adult education classes." "That sounds perfect for you," I said, knowing how passionate she was about architecture that served community needs rather than just aesthetics. "It's exactly what I've always wanted to do," she agreed. "Creating spaces that make a difference in people's lives, not just showcasing wealth." We ordered our usual dishes: lasagna for me, linguine with clams for her, and Rachel filled me in on the details of the project. Her passion was palpable as she described her vision for a building that would be both beautiful and functional, a hub for community connection and growth. "There's something else," she said as our meals arrived, her expression softening. "I've been seeing someone." I raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "Anyone I know?" "Actually, yes," Rachel laughed. "Remember Jason Parker? He was in my architecture program at university." The name clicked immediately. Tall guy, glasses, always reading obscure architectural theory. He came to the house a few times to work on projects. "That's him," Rachel nodded. "He's working at Habitat for Humanity now, overseeing their building projects. We reconnected at a sustainable design conference last month." "And?" I prompted gently. "And he's kind, Dad. Genuinely kind. He asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He respects what I do, who I am." She twirled linguine around her fork, thoughtful. "He grew up like we did. Modest means, lots of love. His parents are teachers, too." I listened as Rachel described their first few dates: walks in the park, coffee at local shops, a community theater production. Simple pleasures, meaningful conversations. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed to impress or intimidate. "He sounds wonderful," I said when she finally paused for breath. "And you sound happy." "I am," she confirmed. "But I'm also scared. After Daniel, I keep waiting for the mask to slip, for the real person to emerge." I raised across the table, covering her hand with mine. "That's natural after what you experienced. But remember, Daniel's problem wasn't that he wore a mask that eventually slipped. It was that he valued the wrong things from the beginning." "I know you're right," Rachel sighed. "I just need to trust my judgment again." "Trust yourself, yes, but also pay attention. The signs were there with Daniel. We both saw them, but they were easy to dismiss in the excitement of his world." Rachel nodded slowly. "Jason's world isn't exciting in that way. It's peaceful. Purposeful." She smiled. "He wants to meet you, by the way. I told him all about my amazing dad who taught me what really matters in life." "I'd like that," I said, warmth spreading through my chest. "Very much." The evening continued, our conversation flowing from Rachel's new relationship to her work, to my students, and the novel I was finally making progress on after years of starts and stops. As we shared tiramisu for dessert, Marco hovering nearby to ensure we had everything we needed, I marveled at the journey of the past year, from the disaster of Rachel's wedding to this moment of authentic joy. Every step had been a lesson in the true meaning of success. Not measured in acquisitions or status, but in purpose, connection, and alignment with one's deepest values. After dinner, while Rachel was in the kitchen preparing coffee, Jason stayed behind, helping me clear the table. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "how much I respect your daughter. She's the most remarkable person I've ever met." "She is," I agreed, watching his face carefully. "Rachel told me about Daniel," he continued, his expression serious, "about what happened at the wedding, afterwards. I can't imagine treating anyone that way, especially someone you claim to love." I nodded, appreciating his directness. People have different definitions of love. For some, it's about possession, status, control. And for you? Jason asked. What's your definition? The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. Love is respect, I said after a moment's reflection. It's seeing someone completely. Flaws, quirks, dreams, fears, and choosing them anyway. Not despite who they are, but because of it. Jason nodded slowly. That's beautiful. And rare. Not as rare as you might think, I countered. Just rarely celebrated in a world obsessed with appearances. Later that evening, after Jason had left with plans to meet Rachel the following weekend, she stayed behind to help me finish cleaning up. So? She asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide her eagerness. What do you think? I pretended to consider the question seriously. Well, his taste in wine is questionable. And did you notice how he arranges his food into separate sections on his plate? Quite concerning. Rachel swatted me with a dish towel. Dad, be serious. I laughed, dropping the teasing tone. He's wonderful, Rachel. Truly. He sees you, the real you, and values what he sees. Relief and happiness flooded her face. That's exactly how I feel with him. Like I can be completely myself, without performing or editing or trying to fit some preconceived notion of what I should be. That's the foundation of something real, I told her. Everything else, the excitement, the romance, the day-to-day logistics, can be built on that foundation. But without it, even the most impressive structure will eventually collapse. Like with Daniel, she said softly. Like with Daniel, I agreed. But you've learned from that experience, not just about him, but about yourself, about what you truly value and what you won't compromise on. Rachel dried the last dish, hanging the towel carefully on its hook. You know what's strange? I'm actually grateful for what happened with Daniel. Grateful? I echoed, surprised. Not for the pain or the humiliation, she clarified, but for the clarity it eventually brought. I might have spent years, maybe even a lifetime, trying to earn the approval of someone who could never truly see me. Instead, I got a crash course in what matters and what doesn't. I considered this recognizing the profound wisdom in her perspective. Some lessons can only be learned through difficulty. Exactly, Rachel nodded. And now I know, really know, not just intellectually, but in my bones, that the life I'm building is aligned with what I truly value. My work matters, my relationships are authentic, my choices are my own. As spring blossomed into summer, Rachel's relationship with Jason deepened, rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Her community center project progressed from blueprints to foundation, each phase bringing new challenges and satisfactions. My novel found an agent, then a publisher, a small press that specialized in literary fiction, offering modest advances but genuine enthusiasm for the story I'd spent years crafting. Life settled into a rhythm of purposeful work, meaningful connections, and simple pleasures. Not the glossy, Instagram-worthy lifestyle that Daniel had promised, but something far more valuable, a life of integrity and alignment, where outer circumstances reflected inner values. I know, he replied. I came to see you. This was unexpected. Me? Why? Daniel stared out at the quiet street, the modest houses with their small, well-tended yards, the bicycles left on porches, the wind chimes tinkling in the evening breeze. I made partner last month, he said abruptly. Youngest in the firm's history. Congratulations, I offered, genuinely meaning it despite our history. Achievement was still achievement, even if I questioned the values behind it. Thank you, he said, then fell silent again. When he finally continued, his voice had lost its usual polish. I should be happy. It's everything I've worked for. But lately, I've been thinking about something you said at the wedding. I waited, giving him space to find his words. You said I would have a life, but not a home, Daniel recalled. I dismissed it at the time as the bitter ramblings of someone who couldn't understand real success. But now, he gestured vaguely at the street, the neighborhood, the simple life that surrounded us. I'm starting to think you understood something I didn't. The admission clearly cost him. Each word dragged reluctantly from a place he rarely visited, vulnerability. What happened? I asked quietly. Daniel laughed, a hollow sound, without humor. Nothing dramatic, just emptiness. I have the corner office, the luxury condo, the sports car. I'm dating a model who looks perfect on my arm at firm events. Everything I thought I wanted. But none of it matters, he admitted. The words barely audible. None of it feels real or meaningful. It's just stuff. Status symbols, things to impress people I don't even like. I studied him carefully, seeing beyond the perfect suit and manicured appearance to the profound loneliness beneath. Why are you telling me this? Daniel turned to face me fully. Because you were right. About me, about what matters, and I owe you an apology. The things I said about you, about your life, they were cruel and wrong. The apology surprised me, both in its sincerity and its humility. This was not the Daniel I had encountered at the wedding or in the aftermath of Rachel's decision to leave. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I'm not the one who was most deeply hurt by your actions. I know, Daniel acknowledged. I've written to Rachel as well. Not asking for another chance or trying to disrupt her life, just offering an apology. She deserves at least that much. We sat in silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky, the first stars appearing overhead. In that moment, I felt an unexpected compassion for the man beside me. Not because he had changed fundamentally. One conversation couldn't undo a lifetime of valuing the wrong things, but he had at least begun to question the path he had chosen. It's not too late, you know, to build a life around what truly matters. Daniel looked skeptical. At this point, I'm not even sure what that is anymore. Start with honesty. With yourself, with others. Ask yourself what brings you genuine satisfaction, not just status or approval. Connect with people who value you for who you are, not what you represent or provide. That sounds difficult. It is, I agreed. Much harder than buying another status symbol or climbing another rung on the corporate ladder, but infinitely more rewarding. As Daniel prepared to leave, he paused at the bottom of the porch steps. I don't expect forgiveness, especially from Rachel, but I wanted you to know that your words, the ones I mocked at the time, they made a difference. Eventually. I nodded, acknowledging the courage it had taken to admit this. The measure of a person isn't in never making mistakes, Daniel. It's in how they respond when they recognize those mistakes. After he drove away, I remained on the porch, reflecting on the unexpected encounter. I didn't harbor any illusions that Daniel had completely transformed. People rarely change their fundamental values overnight, especially when those values have been reinforced by success and social approval throughout their lives. But he had taken a step, a small one, perhaps, but significant in its humility. And in doing so, he had affirmed what Rachel and I had discovered through much pain and reflection.
that a life built on authentic values, even if modest by worldly standards, offers rewards that no amount of wealth or status can provide. When I told Rachel about Daniel's visit, she was understandably skeptical. "People don't change that dramatically," she said, echoing my own thoughts. "Probably not," I agreed.
But they can begin to question, to see beyond the limitations of their worldview. That's something. Rachel considered this, her expression thoughtful. I suppose in a way I should thank him. If I hadn't married Daniel, hadn't seen so clearly what I didn't want, I might never have recognized what I do want. And what's that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A life of purpose, she replied without hesitation. Relationships built on mutual respect. Work that contributes something meaningful to the world. And most importantly, the courage to be authentically myself, even when it means walking away from something that looks perfect on the surface but feels wrong at its core. Months later, as summer faded into autumn once again, Rachel and Jason invited me to dinner at their newly purchased home, a modest craftsman bungalow they were gradually renovating together, learning as they went, making mistakes and laughing about them, creating something uniquely theirs. The house was warm and inviting, filled with books and plants, mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than style, walls adorned with local art and photographs of people they loved. As we sat around their dining table, a restored antique Rachel had found at a flea market, sharing a meal they had prepared together, I was struck by the simple perfection of the moment. This was success, not measured in square footage or brand names or impressive addresses, but in the genuine connection between people who saw and valued each other completely. In the alignment between outer circumstances and inner values. In the quiet confidence that comes from building a life on a foundation of truth rather than appearance. Rachel caught my eye across the table, her expression questioning. "Dad, you're awfully quiet." I smiled, raising my glass in a toast. Just appreciating the moment. To authentic lives and the courage to live them. Jason and Rachel raised their glasses, the candles on the table casting a warm glow across their faces. In their eyes, I saw what I had always hoped Rachel would find. Not the hollow pursuit of status that had drawn her to Daniel, but the genuine satisfaction of a life well lived according to one's deepest values. Daniel's words at the wedding reception had been meant as the ultimate insult, that Rachel might end up just like me, living a modest life without the trappings of conventional success. But sitting in this warm kitchen, surrounded by evidence of a life rich in purpose and connection, I knew that what he had intended as criticism had become Rachel's greatest blessing. She had indeed ended up just like me in the ways that mattered most, choosing authenticity over appearance, purpose over status, meaningful connection over impressive acquisition. And in making that choice, she had found what Daniel, for all his wealth and accomplishments, still sought: a sense of home, of belonging, of alignment between who she was and how she lived. As for me, the English teacher in his worn suit, the father who had raised his daughter to value substance over style, I had received the greatest validation of all. Not in being proven right about Daniel, but in witnessing Rachel discover her own truth, and having the courage to live it, even when the alternative glittered with false promises. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing, about Daniel's world versus mine. It was about the universal human search for meaning, purpose, and authentic connection. Some find it in wealth and status, others in modest lives of integrity and purpose. The path matters less than the destination. A life that reflects one's deepest values, whatever those may be. And as I looked around that table,
at my daughter's radiant face and the home she was creating, not just in physical space, but in her choices and relationships, I knew she had found her way. Not without pain, not without detours, but with ultimate clarity about what truly constitutes a life well lived.